everybody. This is the new Mass Tangents podcast with myself, Drew Guffey. I am a sales representative and segment leader for the alternative market. And that's primarily what we will be talking about on this episode or series of episodes. This is my esteemed colleague, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rob Garcia, and I am the Western United States Technical Advisor for WinField United, and I also fulfill the duties of helping to develop nutritional products, both granular, solubles, and liquids for WinField, and have been assisting Drew, trying to develop a plan and a product portfolio for the alternative market. Today, Drew and I are going to just go over some of the things that we see in the industry about the planning aspect of the hemp market. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is kind of something that gets missed a little bit with that. And it's what are we going to do with our product and how are we going to go to market? So, Drew, you want to take over and kind of go over some of the different ways that we can actually make a profitable hemp production business? And,
off of what Rob said, we're just here to share some of our insights and what we have in our head, because a lot of times these things get missed, and we just want to have a pretty frank conversation about, how this process goes and how to get started with it. So without further ado, we'll jump right in and get talking about, how to plan and organize a hemp crop. So with the first ones, we have to consider what we're going to sell.
Exactly.
What are we going to sell? Are we going to sell smokable flour? Are we going to sell biomass? Are we looking at keef type products? We have to plan accordingly for the end goal.
And I think that's something that in this industry, as we've watched it develop here in the state of Colorado, and then nationally, is people have a person has land. They have the ability they have some land to use. They have a water source. They see this as a way to utilize what they have already to make money. Maybe they are an agricultural operation. They could have been an ornamental operating facility, outdoor nursery, etc. All kinds of different areas have been converted over to hemp in the state of Colorado. And then we've also seen some large facilities out onto the plains in areas that were just fallow ground. So you see these people start the process. They go through their first season. Maybe it takes them 2 seasons to get a good crop going and actually have some quality sellable material. But at some point they're going to hit that, and oftentimes they don't know what to do with it. So,
and I think part of that comes from just the volatility of the market.
Oh, absolutely.
When everybody started jumping in, the market was through the roof. Everybody was getting rich really quick on small amounts of acreage.
Yep.
Now we're not necessarily in that realm anymore. We have to be a little bit more cognizant of how much we spend on our inputs and being more cognizant of who we're going to sell to, because, looking at last year, there's still product on the ground that people haven't sold.
And in some cases, you see farms that they get to the point where either they don't have the quality of a crop or there was an issue. Some stuff didn't even get harvested. They'll just leave it in the field and they won't ever harvest the crop. So I think it's really important for the farmer to actually decide what they're going to do. And biomass was always the first part of it. 2 years ago, you were getting, $40 a pound for biomass. In many cases with biomass, they'll take the weight and then the concentration. So if you can grow higher CBD, CBDG, whatever the cannabinoid that your crop's producing, if you can grow a higher concentration, you'll get more per pound. And I saw people that would be able to sell that product by the 1st of January, getting ready for the next season. Then the next year, you saw that go to $15 a pound, same percentage CBD. So all of a sudden that crop was worth a third of what it was worth the year before. And it was taking well into March, April, and even some cases people had it sit for an entire year because they couldn't get rid of their crop. So biomass kind of, I don't know what you think, but it kind of has started to shift away from that. And we're seeing people come up with alternatives to biomass for smokable flower, like Drew mentioned. And then also something that I've been seeing is that basically the collection of the crystals. Collectively in the industry, people will call it keef, but they'll separate all the crystals off of the leaves, stems, flower, etc., and start to sell that in a very high concentrated form.
And typically the keef has been a byproduct of, whatever harvesting method you're using. Now people are starting to look at that a little bit more. Let's specifically harvest the keef, not just collect whatever falls off in this process.
Exactly. And that's then, we're going to talk next about the genetics choosing. So now we have decided what we're going to try to grow. We're going to look at the genetics of what our crop is going to be. So different types of plants will have different levels of crystal, different levels of CBD. They will also have higher quality flower mass. So if your decision is to grow smokable flower, then you want to choose a variety that the companies that are providing either the seeds or the clones are saying that that's a higher quality flower plant.
Yeah, the whole point is to maximize your profits at the end of the year. So knowing what you're going to sell enables you to decide what genetic you're going to buy, and some of those genetics may be more or less money depending on what you're targeting. If you're just trying to grow biomass and you don't necessarily care what's in there, you're just going to shred it all up, or what it looks like, I should say. You could possibly buy a cheaper seed or a cheaper clone in that instance, and then take it into the field that way. Save the money on the front end.
Right, exactly. Yeah, when you mention that, where do you see clones being sold at dollar-wise per clone? As that came down, as we've seen this drop in the price of biomass?
Absolutely. A couple years ago, when this whole trend, if you want to call it that, kicked off.
Fad.
Fad. There you go. We saw prices all over the board. The average price was probably in that $4 realm, mm-hmm. But I've seen stuff selling for $10, $12 a piece.
Right.
And that's that might be smaller orders or whatever.
Sure.
Last year, I saw stuff sub $2
for a clone.
Okay. Yeah. If you're talking about germinized seed, or feminized seed, sorry. If you buy the seed, just the seed to throw in your field, or however you decide to plant it, a couple years ago prices were above $1 per seed.
Yeah.
Now they're under.
I saw stuff even up as high as $1.50 for varieties that had been touted as high concentration and high volume. They were wanting. I saw something that was close to $2.
Yeah, now
smaller orders. Yeah. Obviously, there's a volume with seeds. You buy 10,000 or you buy 1,000.
Right, volume.
You get a different price.
Volume is king in this area. But,
sure.
Now we're looking at prices sub 50 cents, even down to 25 cents or lower.
Really?
Depends on how many seeds somebody has and how bad they want to get rid of them, or whatever the scenario is.
And I know we've talked about this. You see that there are companies that have an excess of seeds because the market kind of went up in acreage. Now we've had a little bit of a downward. Yep. So not as many acres in the state are being planted. Yeah,
well, what you got to consider, and how that supply and demand runs in every industry. But the producers of the seed, for instance, saw all these acres getting planted, and we'll just pick a year. We'll say 2018. And they see the acreage going through the roof. Well, those seeds had to come from somewhere. Well, now they're saying, it's going to continue to grow. They bet the farm on that it was going to grow.
Double production.
So everybody started growing all the seeds. Well, 2019, 2020 came. Mm-hmm. The price of the end product went way down,
right?
As we saw. And now, less people started jumping in. The acreage went down. Now there's a surplus of seeds, supply, demand. I think right now we're looking at, volatility, and I think we'll start seeing an uptick at some point once, the boys become men or whatever whatever you want to call it. But yeah.
You've mentioned, and we both have feminized seed. Can you give them a brief explanation on just exactly what we're talking about? Because I think the idea of clones is a much easier to grasp concept for people, but maybe the feminizing process. And really, originally when I started to see more acreage and more hemp production going on in the state of Colorado, it was almost all clones.
Yep.
But, when you start looking at, average 22,000, 2,200, you're talking, at $4 a clone. You're talking $8,000 an acre. We plant 10 acres, we got $80,000 into our clones. The seeds, again, even if we were at $1, now we're talking $8,000 or, to plant a lot, much smaller amounts.
Absolutely.
So can you go into that feminized seed process
so I'm sure a lot of people listening or watching know about this, but for those who don't, the feminized process is essentially tricking a female plant into becoming a male and casting pollen. So what they do, there's a product that you apply to the plant. It's a multi-week process. And you trick the female to becoming a male, and it produces pollen just like a male would.
Yep.
Well, when you do that, the female plant doesn't have any male genetics.
Okay.
So when it starts producing pollen, it only produces female type pollen. And
so it pollinates itself with female.
It doesn't pollinate itself.
Okay.
You then take that plant and introduce it to the rest of your crop, your other females.
Okay. Yep.
And now you have, essentially, what's the word I'm looking? A hermaphrodite.
Yep.
Where a woman's trying to be a man, but there's no genetic reasoning for it to be a man. So that pollen then pollinates those female plants. Female pollen on a female plant equals a female seed, right? So there's, it's a process to trick it. It's relatively easy, to do, but it is a process, and there's a scheduling to it that has to be
through
done.
the applications of the
What
is the approximate breakdown of the product that you're talking about?
It's a silver nitrate product. Okay. Silver nitrate, and it just tricks the female into being a male and producing pollen.
Got it.
What
level of effect is this? How successful is this process?
It has to be regimented, right? You have to be on it. I see all the time people try to cut corners with it. Me, myself, I like to err on the side of caution whenever I'm personally doing it.
Yep.
I like to extend things on both ends of the schedule an extra week. More is safer in this scenario. Because if you cut the corner, you try to cut a week out.
Right.
That could cause a reversion of the trickery, if you will.
Sure.
And it will cause some male genetics to stumble into your feminized seeds.
Okay.
When that happens, as everything in nature, 50-50 male female.
Yeah.
Right. You'll see, a good feminizer can produce 99.5 and upwards.
Right.
I'm erring on the side of caution there myself, but you fall into a scenario where you bought some seed that ends up being 25% male. Whoever you bought that seed from did not.
What you do hear about that, where you have
all the time, and there's no. I have yet to see a 100% success rate.
Right.
But we can get 99.9. One per every 1,000 seeds.
And then you're talking a couple males per acre. So at a 10-acre facility, like, fictitiously we're talking about, we're trying to go out and find 20 males.
Yeah.
And roll them out and get rid of them so that we don't have that problem.
Yeah, and this feminizing process reduces the number that you're looking at,
right?
And reduces that in-field labor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
It's a slow process.
If you have 20, you have to dig up 20, but if you have 4, you only have to dig up 4. So there's a labor aspect to it as well.
And finding them.
Finding them, yeah. That's a big part.
You got to catch it right at that time, which for us here, what do you think? Maybe the first week of July-ish, mid-July, somewhere in that zone. Yep. Start roaming the field.
Yeah, you should be able to start seeing the differences in the two. Okay. Obviously, as your light gets lower, your day length gets shorter. Yep. Your night length gets longer. That's when they revert to flowering or
going from the vegetative to the flowering stage.
Exactly. So that's a big process. If you go with clones, you're looking at a higher price tag and maybe potentially a different way of planting them in the field. But the benefit of a clone is you get 100% theoretically.
You're not looking for those.
You're not looking for
the labor. So is the labor worth it to save the money on the clone versus feminized seed?
Yeah. And you can buy a feminized seed that's germinated in a nice little plug. When you put them next to the clone that you bought, they look exactly the same. It's just a matter of how you got to that process. The germanized feminized seed it typically is a cheaper price.
What would you think that would come into cost?
Obviously it depends on how much you buy the seed for, but to plant and germinate that seed, a typical producer or grower can expect somewhere in the vicinity of $1.
Got it. Okay.
Plus or minus, obviously, depending on volume, quantity, where you're doing it, who's doing it. Yep. There's a lot of aspects to that.
And basically, you obviously have people that from the greenhouse experience that are doing this, taking feminized seeds, germinating them, getting them ready, just like they would any other plant to sell into the garden center.
Yep.
Or in the case of some of the people that I've dealt with, they bought the seeds. We created a small little fluorescent-based grow chamber.
Yep.
Kept it at the right temperature for maximum germination. We were able to fertilize, and we had the same thing. There was no difference in what the trays looked like when we started hauling them out to put into the water wheel planter. We just saved a bunch of money, maybe spent some money on labor and care, but we were confident that our plants were ready to go. And we were also able to monitor the root mass. So we started to get in a week or two in, and we had some that were kind of straggling.
Yeah, you have control over the situation.
We scrapped them and started.
I like to joke with my friends, my customers, everybody. It's not rocket science.
No,
but it is plant science.
It is.
So it's still science to some capacity.
So one of the kind of along the same lines with the genetics, we also have seen a big change. And are seeing more and more every year from CBD to CBG. And what do you think the ratio is now? Maybe 80-20?
Yeah, probably 80-20 was probably what we were looking at last year, realistically. Okay, it's still hard to say where we're going to be this year.
Right.
CBG, a lot of people were switching to that because of multiple scenarios.
Sure.
CBG seemingly was less... likely to go hot on THC.
That's the main reason that I've seen people make the change.
Yep. People also like they like the benefits medicinally of the CBG.
It is supposed to be the most, I believe, analgesic of the cannabinoids that we can get from these variety of hemp plants.
Yep. But I think the biggest factor is the sale price.
Absolutely. You get a little
supply
more
and demand again.
Yep. No. And maybe there's less people looking for it, but when you get the right buyer, they want the CBG.
Yep.
And the other thing is that what I've seen is that going back to the considerations of what we're going to grow, how we're going to sell it, some of the newer varieties to me and what I've seen in the field. And we're going to share some photos throughout the presentation with you guys. So we'll have some photos of some CBG plants. You'll notice that the smokable flower quality was there. They're bigger flowers. We were able to use more nutrition. When we grew CBD the year prior, and played with a few test areas with increased nitrogen, went from the old 0.3 allowable by the state to almost 5.
Yeah.
That's missing the window a little bit.
Yeah.
That's a few points off.
Yeah. Yep.
But the CBG 0.1 across the board. Slight, some of it was a little like 0.2, but it was all, the average was almost a third of what you're allowed. And we used substantially more nitrogen, so we got bigger plants. We were able to, more plant material, more flower per acre per same dollar, same investment, other than a little bit more nutrition.
Yep. So we mentioned it a couple of times, talking about the different, how nutrition is affected.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Before we dive fully into that part of it, let's talk about the field.
Okay.
What do you think, what can we do, what can't we do in our field before we plant?
Sure.
To make sure we're going to have a better chance of success.
So I think that one of the first things that is really important, especially if the fields have been utilized for other crops, or even if they've been fallow for a large amount of time and we're trying to convert them back to production. Maybe it's an old agriculture facility that they quit farming. These could have been, multiple crops here. It could have been corn, could be wheat. I mean, there's so many things that are growing throughout the state of Colorado.
Conventional, non-conventional.
Could have been a nursery.
Yeah.
Could have been a sod farm. For all we know. But one of the things I really think we need to get a good handle on is the quality of our soil and especially the quality of our water. So doing good soil and water analysis this time of the year is going to allow us to put a better program together prior to planting, and then also how are we going to take care of that crop throughout the growing season. So when we look at soil and water analysis, we have our traditional soil reports. We can run them at the university. We have more sophisticated labs now that we tend to like to use because they can do some other analysis as well. But they're just going to be your general acid extraction soil test. And they're going to tell us our NPK, the pH of our soils, which is important, and then also the micronutrients. And that's what's going to be in our soil. Now,
will these show you if you have existing heavy metals in the soil? Because that's a big point. Of contention.
In certain states more so than others.
Yeah.
And so it will not, but that is easy to do. You will pick up some of them just because, and really talk to who you're working with, and let them know that you're concerned about heavy metals. Maybe you're in an area that cadmium or something that could potentially be picked up in the biomass. Which would make it not sellable in certain parts of the country from your soils. So if you do have heavy metals, and I've worked with a couple of growers, outdoor growers in the California area, and they are one of the states that has an issue with heavy metals, and he ran some tests. We were a little high, so we actually looked at what cover crops we could grow prior to putting it into production to get the heavy metals to, and many of our grasses that are common, alfalfa and some of these other legumes.
I've heard in California specifically, I've heard of people, getting rid of some of their, call it junk seed.
Yeah.
Talking industrial hemp kind of stuff. Using that as a cover crop, grow it for a couple, few weeks to a couple months.
Yep.
Pull all that out because hemp is notorious for pulling that stuff out of the soil, and then you just chop it and get rid of it. You don't want to put added inputs in, so you just let it do its thing, give it some water, whatever.
No, that was one of the two recommendations.
But it sounds like the grass might be easier.
The grass is a little bit easier, especially if you can get a hold of. And I had talked to a few people. They gave me a list of some annual grasses. so we didn't have to deal with the establishment over and over again of the grasses and have to go, I got a perennial and I thought it was going to die off. I burned off, all the different techniques they use to strip a field. We looked at some annual grasses and did some of both. Actually, is what the guys in California decided to do.
So you kind of just mentioned it, so I'm going to roll right into it. Burning things off the field, right? So now we have some soil testing. We have some ideas of what we're gonna put our plants into, what we're going to put on our plants, the soil and the water.
Yep.
What if there's existing vegetation? What are we going to do about that?
And that's one of those things that's a little bit, it's a hard thing to deal with, because of, depending on the states, depending on the restrictions of products you can use, and then ultimately, are we looking for organic certification or traditional? And if it's traditional, then we have a whole bunch of easy contact herbicides that we can use to clean up the field. Because there's going to be some residual then, and you're going to be within that 3 to 5 year, depending on the area, for organic certification, that's going to be a problem. We do now have some products that are organic certified that can be used as a burn down prior to. So in a lot of cases, if it's a fallow field where you have some miscellaneous native grasses, etc., that we need to get rid of, maybe some residual alfalfa or corn from an old agriculture crop, they'll tend to get it tilled up, start prepping the soil, then see what comes up, spray it either traditionally or with some of these burn down organic, the final sands, the Avenger type products of the world, burn down, and then go on to the next stage of prep, which would be where, they're going to start to look at laying the irrigation, putting in the lines, putting in the pot plastic. Are they going to use drip tape? Whatever they decided for their process, they'll then start to do that after they've done those mechanical activities and taken care of anything that's an issue.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, just driving around rural Colorado here,
and it's common.
Yeah, it's common. You see the farmers tilling their fields all winter long, more or less. Obviously in the cold months, there's not a lot of activity. But now I know my neighbors are starting to run their plows out there. The stuff that is germinating, they're trying to knock it down.
I would always caution people that if you are going from, I know a operation up in Steamboat that was an old alfalfa facility. They, in that area there's a lot of horse people in the Steamboat area.
Yeah, so alfalfa, perennial
all over. Timothy grass. And that was a little harder to get under control. It's great because it's great for wind and water erosion because you don't have bare ground, so you're not losing your good soil. Your good soil is mainly on the top, but you got to get rid of that mat layer. So it took a little bit. What we actually ended up doing, and it's worked out pretty well for us if you're in that situation, was we stripped 4-foot wide rows, and in between we left the native grasses. Because it's a great cover crop.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, you have that ability to just cut the.
It was very labor consuming. The gentleman that came out and did all the mechanical activity was a former farmer from up in the Yampa Valley, and he had a hard time with it to get it prepped out. But when it was all done, we ended up with nice areas of green native in the middle. The plastics areas with soil, the plants went in those. They ran the drip down those. It was very nice when it was done. It was just very hard to do, and it was something that there was a lot of unforeseen things. Originally, her idea and her mother's was to completely strip the whole place. And after they did this tiny little segment, they're like, well, we got enough ground done to plant about 1,000 plants. We'd like to plant 10,000 plants, so we need to pick up the pace and the operation.
Yeah, and I think what they stumbled upon is a good point. If you have extra space, you're not trying to jam cram every nook and cranny.
Yep.
having that cover crop down, you see it in nurseries all the time. They'll plant grass and
Sure.
keeps the weeds out.
Yeah.
I'd much rather go and mow some grass. Or, if you don't want to plant grass or the cover crop and you're okay having, you're not worried about the aesthetics of your field.
Right.
If you space wide enough to whatever mowing device you have, whether that be a push mower, a riding lawnmower, a tractor, whatever it is, being able to get between and just mow rather than, having those weeds, especially at a younger stage. Oh, which is typically when everything's growing the fastest, the weeds included.
Right.
We're getting the most rainfall in the early summertime. Weeds are growing at that point too. So how do you keep those away? I think that's a good point to consider, is the spacing in general.
Well, and when you lay these fields out, one of the things that we've changed on the field and rifle is that we took out every fourth row.
Yeah.
Because we had extra area around the sides. So it's going to expand out. We're still going to have as many plants, but having those access rows, because if you look at some of the photos that we're going to add in, you're going to see that once these are at full maturity and start to flower, they almost touch. So now they're a great shade, so the weeds in the middle, but we need to do something to maintain them early. So that I've seen fields, and again, we mentioned that, I prefer to germinate my feminized seeds so that I have a good starter, and I know I have some good root mass. But the people that go out and just plant, like we're growing corn and just run the planter down the row and drop hemp seeds into the furrow above the drip tape, that's a little harder to get a good crop. And again, like you said, if we get any natural rain, if we have a wetter spring, the weeds love that weather. So the weeds will outgrow the hemp.
Yeah.
So keeping and maintaining.
Even though hemp is a weed.
Well, so it is, but it is definitely something. That's probably one of the planting parts that people forget about until they're up to their knees and every inch of ground is covered in bindweed because it's such a common quick grower in this part of the country.
Yeah, starting to comb up the stems. And
so that's you need to plan ahead.
Okay. So let's talk about nutrition then.
Okay. So, when we're looking at nutrition, because we're out there, we're getting the fields ready, we have our irrigation set up and how we're going to do it. When we did our soil reports, maybe there was something in the reports that we picked up that were really low in. Another thing with our soils here and in a lot of these areas that are starting to be, Montana, Oklahoma, we have low organic matter. And we also have, in a lot of cases, alkaline soil, so we have higher pH. So it's much easier at that point in time in the planting phase to look at a pre-plant and doing some pre-planting and banding where the plants would be. So there's a little bit of a technique there, and it takes a little time to dial in how to do bands of nutrition. Yeah. But our soil reports, again, can help us with trying to tell us, hey, I need to correct this here, I need to correct there. It's going to be cheaper in a granular form. If we say have a high pH, we're going to start to add some sulfur or some gypsum to help work on starting to bring that down. If we have an organic matter, we're in some heavy clay soils, our organic matter's less than 1. Now's a good time to add some organic matter. So that pre-plant banding and utilizing granulars is going to be much more economical to the project.
So when you're talking about, pre-plant banding, tell me the difference between, or the benefit of doing a band versus as a complete broadcast.
So basically, and especially if we're doing big acres, if we're only doing 5 or 10 acres, really, as we're doing that mechanical activity and the broadcast the entire field. But again, we have about 4 feet of between. So when we start to go 4 feet of bare ground, our planting zone, 4 feet of bare ground, we start to add that up over acres. We're putting out a lot of nutrition that really isn't necessary.
It might get lost.
It's going to be easier, don't get me wrong, because you're going to be able to, a lot of these guys have a nice tractor that they're working with. You can throw a lily spreader on the back of a tractor and broadcast 10 acres in an hour. The banding might take you 2 or 3, but the nutrition that you're paying for is going to be right where you want it. In some of the projects where we were doing an organic, buying something cheap, we got these big poultry farms up here, up the road. Poultry, dehydrated poultry waste is cheap.
That's got to go somewhere.
It's got to go somewhere. So that, I'd probably just do the whole field and just till it in.
Okay.
But then if we're starting to use some higher, if we have a potassium deficiency or a phosphorus deficiency where we're looking at, wanting to put out, 300-400 pounds to the acre, now we're starting to talk about a little more cost. The other thing that we can do is if we just want to have a general base nutrition, maybe our soil report's good, everything's adequate, but not excessive, not low, it's just kind of in the middle. Maybe we do a 1-to-1-to-1, like the 14-14-14
right.
we're talking
Sure.
about. And we just ban that. We can look at, 14-14-14s that have some organic in them. Always adding a little organic matter, because that is probably the thing that I see the most deficient is organic matter. And then also dealing with that pH issue where when we move to these more alkaline pHs, which are very common in this part of the country, and you start to bind up other nutrients, micronutrients especially. So
with the nutrients, is it better to do the granular, or if we have a fertigation system, run it in the water, and that way, you don't even have to worry about putting the granular form down. It's just always delivered in the water.
I like fertigation. I think this is an industry where fertigation makes sense, both to be able to deliver it through the drip exactly to the root zone where the plant has it. We don't need nutrition all over the place.
Yeah.
It's not going to put its root system 4 feet out in the small amount of time that it takes for these plants to develop.
Yeah.
I mean, you pull one out at the end of the season, a good healthy one might have a basketball.
Yeah.
So you got a basketball. Why do we want to put it 2 feet from the plant?
Because the economics are there to make, like you say, it makes sense to, it's a cash crop and it's a valuable crop.
Yep.
Corn, I don't know what today's corn price is, but I know it's a lot less than today's hemp price.
Exactly. Hence why people are converting over.
So putting in to make money, you got to spend a little bit.
Exactly. And the nice part about it is that as we tap into all the resources that we've been exposed to because of the large agriculture market tied to WinField United and all the products that we have in both liquid forms and granular forms and micronutrient packs in soluble and liquid forms, we have a lot of options to look at what we can put out through the fertigation system. The other thing,
all of these products are able to go through the systems.
When we talked about this, Drew and I were setting up for this. I make the comment I put every one of these through the fertigation system except for the couple of
some of the adjuvants.
But everything else has gone through the fertigation system. I can control the rate. I can control the timing. I'm not generating a bunch of labor. I get it set up the night before, turn it on, and it meters it out all night. Yep. Boom, done. The other thing that I've done, and we don't have an example of, is we've taken and addressed this alkalinity issue with some low pH humic acid, fulvic acid, kelp-based biostimulants. And we just pump that through all the time. So that area, again, where the basketball is, for better term, where that root mass is, we're keeping that area at least. So maybe our overall fields have a high alkalinity, but because of our acids and the products that we've used in the past, Gravity Humic L, some of these other similar products.
Root zones where it matters.
pH, we're injecting it with a product that's a pH of about 3.5.
And that's the Humic L product?
That's the Humic L product. And also I have another one that is a little bit easier to use. But either of those, they're both pH of about 3.5.
Okay.
And one of the things I want to note, back to talking about some of the things that we can do at with the soil and water analysis, is testing for the water to know what your water pH is. In a lot of cases, because we have a lot of water that's pulled from ditches, the water quality might start out great, and and then it's going to fall off over time. As it falls off over time, what I mean is that the carbonate levels are going to go up. Things are going to create an issue with our other nutrients are going to start to increase. And over in the western part of the state, towards the Utah border, late in the season, I'll see the canal of ditch water. It'll be like 8.99. Yeah. Many nutrients are unavailable at that point in time. Sure. So that's a time when we want to be able to keep that pH in the root ball, keep things. So one of the things that we can do is we have the ability to do what's in the soil. Again, the traditional acid soil test. But we also have what's called a paste test. And this is a measurement of the soluble nutrients, what's available to the plant. So we may run our soil report and it says we have 100 parts per million of phosphorus necessary for flowering.
Yep.
We want that to be available, but our availability is 10 parts per million. Very, very little for the plant.
Yeah.
So maybe we're not getting the flower mass that we're looking for because we have phosphorus, but we haven't put it in a form that's available. We can then take and look at and grab the amp would be a great choice where we can add some available soluble phosphorus at the point when the plant needs it the most.
Yeah.
Utilizing the efficiency of that fertigation system. But that's just another type of testing that's available to you put your crop in. Boy, it says I got lots of nutrients. My plants, they're just not growing. They just don't look good.
Yeah,
they look anemic.
Just because they're there doesn't mean they're doing anything.
Exactly. They're not. So they're not. We're in a tight market. Back to our first subject. What are we going to do with it? What are we going to sell?
Yep.
We need to move ourselves to the front of the line to sell our product.
Yep. So we have to have the best available product.
You got to have available nutrients.
Yep. Quality counts right now.
Every one of these things we've talked about.
Everybody has hemp, right?
Goes with the other to get the best crop possible. Last thing I kind of want to touch on with the soil and water analysis is we do now have the ability to do some higher tech soil health, like nitrogen, for example. Nitrogen transitions from the urea molecule to the ammonium to the nitrate based on soil microbial population. If we don't have any, then we can't convert what we put out effectively and efficiently to the best form for the plant. So we do now have the ability to test for soil health. And basically what they do is they've developed a couple of techniques that one looks at the amount of carbon dioxide when these microbes go through and help to convert these nutrients to the most available form for the plant, maybe get them out of that soil and get them ready to be taken into the root system. The microbes respirate. So they're able to measure that and know how much microbial activity you have. That carbon to nitrogen ratio, where the nitrogen is being converted, the nitrogen is being converted, but we have enough carbon, so we have a good food source. That's another thing that we can look at. So we have some of these new things that we can look at when we do our analysis. So when we do run soil reports, maybe we're going to run a little more sophisticated one. Again, back to what you said a second ago, this is a valuable crop.
Yeah.
The better we do, the more money we're going to make per acre. And many of these tests and analysis to get us ready when we're planning what we're going to do for the summer really don't cost that much for the amount of acres that we're doing.
And, we talked about the pre-soil and the, pre-planting testing. I think the resin test that the resin technology is fantastic because
absolutely, it's quick.
It mimics what the plant is uptaking in that environment. So, you could be using those before, you could be using those during.
I think they're the type of thing, and what Drew's describing is we have these little balls that they have a cation exchange, the positive nutrients. They have an anion exchange layer, the negative nutrients. Super simple. Keep them in distilled water. You have an area that's not doing as well as the other parts. You can grab one, throw it in. You get your analysis back in 2 to 3 weeks and make an adjustment. Yeah. So it's a really good test and easy.
Yeah. So for the people who have already been growing hemp,
exactly.
They can take samples from around their fields. If they have an area that's been just a sore sore in their back or whatever.
Yep. Oh,
you know, you take them from there, take them from the high, take them from the low spots.
And you see those in those drone photos that I showed you, where you look at the field and like, whoa, those are some really big plants down in the
going on.
right corner, but kind of stragglers over here on the same, 3 quadrants away, 3 zones away. Completely different size of plant, getting the same amount of water, supposedly getting the same amount of water, getting the same amount of nutrition through the fertigation system. Pre-plant was the same. They're half the size.
So those are just really nice soil tests just for basic information as well as what is it mimics what the plant is going to be able to
essentially, it's giving you what is available at the root hair. As it's about to be absorbed into the plant, what is available, because those anion and cation parts of that resin ball, they mimic what's going on, transfer across the root hair.
Yep. Obviously, a very important part of the plan and where we're going to grow. But I think we've talked that one enough.
Oh yeah.
What's the next one?
I think
another problem. Go ahead. Sorry.
I know, and I was going to say, I think that we go through this whole process, we get everything ready, they get the plants to the ground. There's kind of a big sigh of relief. They forget about pest management.
Oh yeah.
They totally forget about it. And they get caught with their pants down.
Yep.
It's like, what? We got pests? What do you mean? I got bugs?
What?
Grasshoppers.
Every year. We have grasshoppers. This is where we live. We live in the West. They're everywhere.
They are. So,
with the pest management, obviously we're very limited in what we can do. So what's the age? An ounce of prevention is a pound of cure.
Absolutely. Especially when you're restricted on many of your products.
Especially when you're restricted. There's many options. Organic, conventional for the ornamental, the flower markets, the row crop kind of stuff. There's lots of options out there that will kill just about anything under the sun, and then some. Stuff that you don't want to kill even in some scenarios. But with the hemp and cannabis, our governors have said, we got to be more cautious. We don't know a lot about this yet. Whether that be smoking it, eating it, drinking it, however you decide to use these products. So they are erring on the side of caution to the extreme. But there are options and there is hope.
There is.
But prevent, right? Make sure you're not putting bugs in the field. So that's making sure you get them from a reliable source, back to the clone or the
where
seed,
you plant the
where it's coming from, start clean, stay clean, that whole scenario comes into play here. For me, there are a couple things have gone through my head that relate to pest management. A big one is how you're going to handle these scenarios.
Yep.
I see people just, I have this issue, but I'm not going to do anything about it.
Right.
It's too hard. I don't have the equipment. Those are all big factors in how you handle these scenarios. When we were talking about the spacing, you mentioned every 4th row we leave a little extra space to drive
a
fogger down, right? And that's huge because a lot of people don't either they ignore that forethought or they don't have that forethought that this crop does get bugs.
And it was. Do you remember when I sent you the picture of the little potato hopper?
Oh yeah,
that was a prime example. We got the crops in. It was year number 1.
Yep.
And the crops in the field. You get a call. We all have a camera in our pocket, so you get a lot of pictures.
Yeah,
you get pictures all the time. Yeah. What is this? And it's like, started looking around. I think it's a potato hopper. More importantly, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
So we saw a pest. We identified it.
Yep.
We came up with a plan. The rows are mainly because of the potato hopper, actually, because it was really hard to spray.
Yeah.
And
I see, big ag, they're using helicopters, airplanes, but what's the realistic, because of the options that we have available to control these scenarios and how quickly we need that turnaround. Typically, the helicopter or the airplane has to be scheduled weeks in advance.
And you're probably not going to find someone that's going to want to do, whether it's the helicopter or the airplane, that's going to want to do 10, 20 acres, even though you have very valuable. That guy's flying 500 acres of corn or beans, etc.
every single day.
Every day. He's got a schedule.
Yeah, so I think with that spacing, if you know what kind of spray rig you have or you're going to have,
absolutely,
knowing how much pressure it produces and how far it can spray, you might be able to stretch that every fourth row out to every fifth row. But you can reach.
We basically know that we can spray back 2 rows.
Yeah.
So that's why.
So you're coming 2 rows on both sides.
Correct. So we got 4 rows, space, 4 rows, space. Yes. You're able to get at that 4 rows from this one and this one.
Yep. And if you, God help you, if you don't end up with bugs, that's great. But it's a good insurance policy.
It is. Because we know we've already had a problem.
Yep.
And I think, we're lucky here because we have a dry, arid climate that isn't affected by disease, powder mildew, all these things that are common in crops that are tight. We're talking about crops that are almost going to touch because these plants are getting so big. And so I think that the spacing idea, if we were in an area, say Michigan or somewhere where we'd have some potential humidity issues, it would allow us to be able to spray back. And just like the insecticides that are labeled specifically for certified by the Department of Ag for hemp and field production, we have powder mildew products as well, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those, like you said, depending on what part of the country you're in, those issues are, disease specifically is prevalent or less prevalent, depending on.
I mean, you think about where hemp took off. It's Colorado, obviously. Oregon, huge.
Yep.
Montana. And they're all fairly dry, semi-arid climates, and in many cases,
Montana and Colorado more so than Oregon.
Well, but still, once you get out past the Willamette Valley area where all that hemp and grapes and all the grass seeds growing, it's fairly. I've been out there on a couple of trips to the grass seed market. It's dry. It's a really nice climate, so great for growing things.
Yeah, but there's even in those dry areas,
you could have potential.
There's potential because I have customers of mine that are irrigating with a pivot.
Yeah, right.
Overhead runs 24 hours. You
have condensation. You're holding moisture in the canopy.
You and I know that when you go into nighttime and you got a wet canopy, that's where your problems happen.
Yep.
So, just being cognizant of that. But there are products, that help with that. Back to the spacing, if you have the ability, specifically in reference to powdery mildew, if you have the ability to spray, whether it's a hot spot or the whole crop ends up with it.
Because when you move into the indoor market that you're more familiar with, they use sulfur burners and other techniques.
Yeah, a lot of them will use sulfur burners, but
really not applicable outside.
There's not applicable outside.
The great big one in the middle of the field.
But the indoor is a whole different piece, just because the control is so much better indoors than outside.
But you also have higher humidity. So
higher humidity, so there's it's a push and pull kind of thing. So so I think that with these crops get better.
I mean, ultimately the theme and preventative is better than curative. Get ready for it with a plan.
Another thing to consider, when you're deciding on a pest control scenario, disease or insect, what are we doing with the crop? Right? Back to the very first thing we talked about. Yep. What are we doing? Does it matter? Right? Can we handle, is it smokable flower? Yes. Okay. Well, we need to make sure that these are pristine to get the highest dollar we can.
Yep.
Is it going into biomass? Can we handle some ugly leaves, because it has some insect damage? Absolutely. But understanding that economic threshold, where does this problem start impacting my profit?
Yep. And that was one of the interesting things where when we went on those tours last year and we got to go into the facility that was doing the isolate and the oil.
Yep.
Drew and I got to tour around and they showed us around on the process of actually taking totes of biomass and then at the end, here's a giant, what was that, like a 5,000 milliliter
Had the big
flask, and he had
bottle,
that giant one full of perfect oil. That ultimately what we want with this process, and he didn't really care what it looked like.
No.
Yeah, no, he didn't even. He was playing around a little bit with how the grind is, and what it came in looking like from the field, but.
Yeah, he was just the lab guy,
He was just the lab guy, yeah.
And he says, I'm here to extract this, and I don't care what it looks like.
Nope.
And that was a biomass situation.
Yeah,
so
but the flower, that guy's gonna.
It's got to be pretty. It has to have good scent, good look, good visual aesthetics. The smokable flower is a whole different ballgame for sure.
It's to me, it's the cream of the crop.
Yeah,
no pun intended.
Absolutely.
It's the best that we can do in an outdoor field.
Yeah.
Do you see anyone growing smokable flower indoors?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. You get high dollar for indoor smokable flower.
That's a desirable.
Absolutely. You get a higher when they know that it was grown indoors. The buyer of that product knows that it was taken care of, right? So that's
all these variables that we've talked about were micromanaged in the greenhouse.
Yeah.
Got it. Yep. Okay.
Exactly.
Perfect. Yeah.
So I think we hit a lot on a lot of points here. So I guess we could just talk a little bit about prepping for the actual planting.
Yep. No. I mean, and that's kind of where we're at. We've gotten through the process. We've made our picks. We've got our fields ready. We have our plants ready, however they are. One thing I will say, as we're prepping for planting, take possession of your plants sooner than you think. Many of these people promise greater amounts of clones, and they don't provide them. I've seen a number of customers that got ready to plant. They ordered 20,000 clones. They got 12.
Yeah.
I don't have enough ready for you now.
Every year it happens. But I completely agree. Take control of your own situation.
Yep.
Now that you're in control of your own destiny.
Yep. And so, as we start prepping for the planting, so we've taken possession of our clones, or we have germinated our feminized seeds and we have them growing. We're looking at the root mass. We've been utilizing some of the plug type products that you and I talked about to just keep spoon feeding them under their fluorescent lights, getting them ready, making sure that the climate, we don't have a big freeze. Last thing you want to do is put all your clones or seedlings out and then get a big frost. So we're looking at that planting window of being more late May, June 1.
Yeah, even mid-June, I see people going out. If you have a good plan, good nutritional plan,
they'll catch right up.
No problem.
And if you have good clones or good seedlings with quality root mass, they just explode once they get out into the field. You watch them for a couple of days, they're kind of they're establishing. Hopefully, we're looking around. We have our water correct, so we're not having them go into a wilt setback stage. They hit the ground. And all of a sudden, they're the size of a paint can.
Yep.
Week later, they're a 5-gallon bucket, and you can just incrementally size them over those first couple of weeks.
Yep.
One of the things that I've always been a big fan of is, again, we don't have much microbial population, so I like to put together a planting program of a few of the products that we have displayed, and in hopes of maximizing root production and overall plant health as we start our establishment phase.
Because a direct correlation from root to canopy is your root mass.
We got little strugglers. I guarantee if we pull it out of the ground, we're not going to have much root mass.
Yep.
You're going to go, oh, now I see why our plants are struggling. But if we pull them out, it's the size of bigger than a basketball, I feel pretty confident that's going to produce a couple pounds of biomass or, up to a pound per plant of good, healthy, smokable flower.
Yeah, for sure.
So
what does that nutritional program look like?
So what I like to utilize is our Gravity SL PGS. That is a plant growth stimulator. And what it's a combination of is gibberellic acid, cytokinins, and endobutyric acid. They just help that plant, and we have a ton of data on root mass establishment with the utilization of PGS.
Yeah, we use it all the time, just
All
on
the time.
normal flowering products.
I've used it on turf,
everything,
trees,
and it's a fantastic.
shrubs.
It's just a good promotion of plant growth.
And the nice part is very low rates are effective early on in the cycle. The other product that
Not to interrupt you there, but that'll work both on the clone and the feminized seed. It'll help it germinate and it'll help the clone take off.
Correct. Yep, absolutely. And so traditionally, we'll start it earlier in the cycle with some of the plug special, the Easy 13213 that we've talked about and you turned me on to. We'll also then add in some Gravity Amp, and the Amp is a product that's got a number of ingredients. One thing that's nice is it has a high phosphorus level. Phosphorus helps with that root establishment early on of both all plants, basically. And then it also has some humic acids and some other biostimulants in it. And they're all in very clean, readily available forms. Yep. So as these plants are taking off and really starting to, get their roots out into the soils, it helps them to establish maximizing the root mass again. More root mass, more vegetative, more flower. And then the last product is mycorrhiza. And essentially mycorrhiza it's a fungi that coats the outer root hairs of the plant, helping to facilitate nutrient uptake. So back to our talks about soil, where we have soils, a lot of stuff's bound up. So anything we can do to help, and there are a number of studies out there that show, the control, no mycorrhiza versus the mycorrhiza control, the root mass will be 2-3 times the control. Yeah. So we're doing a combination of basically.
Yeah, that's no secret knowledge.
No, everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. So
at least the internet knows that, right?
And it's. I mean, you look at how many different forms it's sold on the internet.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable how many, and it's added into fertilizers and soil mixes and pre-plants. I like to utilize it as a dry, not in a liquid form. I worry about that sometimes some of the spore count is lower because you started to have some die off. So the Cybomax that we carry, 2 million spores per ounce, very high spore count.
Yeah.
So
are these products? Do you suggest putting these in through the fertigation system, or do you think putting them in on the water wheel?
So the first year we did it just on the water wheel, and then the next year we had a little bit left over. So the conversation came down to, well, I got some left over, Rob. What do you think? I'm like, is it going to hurt? No. They will tell you look at a lot of studies on mycorrhiza, after the first inoculation and you get your colonization, it really gets to a point it can't get anymore. So, but again, we're putting small amounts of money to maximize an expensive crop. So I have put it through the water wheel just because it's always there and it was easy, but then also do a supplemental 2 weeks after through the fertigation system.
And we see similar programs and on the indoor side of things.
Yep.
Even more frequent, probably about once a week, for the first few weeks, and then
is it hurting?
It's not. It's definitely not hurting. It's specifically on the PGS. That's a stimulant package.
Yep.
The amp the Gravity L amp, that it obviously encourages the development of roots. Even later in the stages, with its high phosphorus, it promotes flowering as well.
Yep.
So there's always a space for Gravity Amp. Yeah, the PGS, it can come and go a little bit, but
we've never seen any detrimental effects of adding tiny bits more.
Yep.
So I think last year when we were working with the CBG, we upped it to we went 2 fertigation cycles after the water wheel and after the little bits that we had drenched them when we started the establishment.
Yeah, you want to make sure that the plants get the product.
Exactly. We want maximum survival, size, and quality. And if we can hit all those by adding small amounts of this through the fertigation system, then we're going to have a better crop.
Yeah.
We're going to be able to sell our crop.
Bingo.
find a home for it. We need a home.
Got to sell it to make money, right?
Exactly. And that's the part that people struggle with the most, honestly.
Yeah.
Many of the things we've talked about, they'll figure out over after a couple of crops. But a lot of people, they struggle with trying to get rid of their crop.
Yeah.
And it could be just as simple as if we had utilized a better plan and nutritional program, knowing our soils, knowing our water, knowing what we're dealing with, knowing what we're growing, then we would have created a higher quality product. One of the interesting things is that I did play, and that's one of the reasons that when we were playing with the on those, we spiked the THC on a few of those zones, and we were playing with that 2 years ago. Our hope was to increase some of the other cannabinoids and try to get that. I mean, you hear about people selling seeds all the time and go, "Oh, this is 18% CBD at harvest." You rarely see it.
Yeah.
We had some 15. We were jumping for joy.
Growing techniques. It's obviously genetics matter.
Exactly.
But at the end, growing techniques also matter.
Yep.
And you can have a salesman who sells you 100% CBD, but you can ruin it by not feeding it the right way.
Correct. Absolutely.
Whatever.
100%.
Yep. So, I think that was one heck of a mass tangent.
It was good. And I think that we will then, Drew and I talked a little bit. The next broadcast, we'll dig a little bit more into some of the nutritional programs.
Yeah, we'll kind of go through the process a little bit. Obviously, this is the planning process.
Yep.
Into the planting of the product. So next we'll kind of talk more about
execution
and keeping things healthy, I guess.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And as always, Rob and I are always available to chat. Feel free to shoot us an email, give us a call. We just talked here for a while, so we like to talk. We like to hear people's experiences. We learn. We like to learn, and we also like to help people learn. So.
And I think it's really important as this industry develops that people like myself and you, we take our experiences, our conversations, and use them to help other people out, because it's just so new that no one has been in it long enough, because it hasn't been around long enough to have all the answers. So talking to customers, talking to people is going to help us to give you guys better insight and answers into the problems that you're going to run into.
Yep. And there's no wrong question. Ask us whatever you want. We'll help you set up programs. We'll help you design a fertigation system.
Yep.
We have that experience. We have customers that do it. We have people that have done it right. We have people that have done it wrong.
For sure.
So, there's knowledge to share here, and all we can do is offer it to others. So happy to help.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.